Ava Hartley stood at the edge of the outdoor market, her small fingers clenched tightly around the straps of her faded backpack. Vendors were packing up for the evening, scraping leftover food into aluminum trays, tossing what they couldn't sell into bins behind their stalls. For the 12th day in a row, Ava waited silently, hoping someone might hand her whatever remained. She never asked. She only stood there, hollow-eyed, fragile, pretending she didn't hear her stomach begging. Tonight, though, something felt different. When the bakery owner slipped her a bag of day-old rolls, another voice suddenly cut through the air, low, careful, but trembling with guilt. "She's been starved for a week," the vendor whispered to the man in the tailored coat beside him. "Her stepmother doesn't feed her, says the girl has to earn it." The man, Julian Pierce, froze. He had just stepped off a flight, still holding the warm Starbucks coffee he grabbed at the airport, never expecting to walk straight into a memory that felt like a punch to the chest. Because years ago, that hungry child had been him. Ava didn't notice his stare. She clutched the small paper bag, murmured a soft thank you, and turned away, trying to walk slowly so she wouldn't look desperate. But her legs trembled. She hadn't eaten a real meal in days. Julian watched her stumble. Something inside him snapped, an old wound reopening, demanding action. He took a step forward, ready to speak, ready to stop her from disappearing into the cold night. But before he could call her name, Ava suddenly collapsed to her knees, the bag of bread rolling across the pavement. Ava Hartley didn't remember the exact moment her life split into a before and an after, but she remembered the sound. The click of the front door closing the night her father never came home. Police lights flashing through the windows, her stepmother, Veronica, standing still as stone, not shedding a single tear. Before that night, Ava had lived in a small, warm house, filled with the smell of her dad's weekend pancakes and the soft hum of old country music drifting from the kitchen radio. She'd been the kind of girl who wrote stories in worn notebooks, who believed grown-ups told the truth, who trusted hugs. But after her father's death, the house changed. Or maybe it was Veronica who changed. She acted sweet at first, bringing Ava hot cocoa, brushing her hair, speaking gently to neighbors about helping the poor girl through her grief. Ava wanted so badly to believe that warmth was real. It wasn't. The first time Veronica locked the fridge, she said it was to teach responsibility. The second time, she said Ava ate too much. By the fifth time, she didn't bother giving a reason. Meals became unpredictable. Rules became traps. Compliments turned into insults so subtle Ava wondered if she imagined them. And when Ava cried, Veronica would sigh dramatically and say, "See? This is why people think you're unstable." Ava learned to shrink herself. Quiet steps, quiet breath, quiet hopes. She slept in the basement on a mattress that sagged like a broken promise. She hid her notebooks after Veronica ripped one apart, accusing her of making up dramatic lies. Yet the worst part wasn't the hunger. It was the loneliness. Neighbors believed Veronica's sweet smile, teachers believed her polite excuses. Adults saw a graceful widow and a troubled girl who needed structure. Ava kept silent, afraid no one would ever believe her. But everything changed last week when Veronica received a letter. Ava saw only one line before it was snatched away. "Your husband's insurance investigation has been reopened." Veronica's face turned white, and Ava, for the first time, felt a flicker of fear that went beyond hunger. Because whatever was in that letter, Veronica blamed her for it. And she would make Ava pay. Ava just didn't know how bad it was going to get. Yet. Julian Pierce didn't know Ava's name yet, but after watching her collapse at the market, he couldn't get her out of his mind. While she was taken to the clinic nearby, he asked for the address on the emergency form. What he found later that evening didn't look like any home a child should return to. The Hartley house sat at the end of a quiet street in southern Illinois, a place where porch lights usually glowed warm and neighbors waved from their driveways. But this house felt wrong the moment Julian stepped onto the cracked walkway. The yard was neglected, weeds climbing around the rusted mailbox, windows dim despite it being early evening. It looked like a house trying to hide its secrets. He knocked politely. Veronica opened the door with a bright, polished smile. Too bright, too practiced. She looked like the kind of woman who charmed rooms without effort, Perfect makeup, styled hair, expensive perfume that didn't match the shabby house behind her. "Oh, you must be mistaken," she said sweetly when Julian asked about Ava. "She has issues, emotional ones. She sometimes refuses to eat. I do everything I can." Julian felt a pressure in his chest. The same warning he used to feel during business negotiations when someone lied smoothly. He glanced behind her. The living room was tidy, but unnaturally so, as if prepared only for visitors. Something felt staged. "I'd like to speak with her," he said calmly. Veronica's smile tightened. "She's resting. Poor thing's always dramatic when she doesn't get her way." Then Julian noticed something. A small basement door down the hallway, padlock hanging from a hook on the frame. Not locked at the moment, just there, waiting. "Does she sleep down there?" he asked. Veronica laughed, a brittle sound. "Of course not. Kids exaggerate, you know how they are." But Julian saw it. The faint imprint of a small hand on the doorframe. The kind a child makes when steadying themselves, coming up thin, creaky steps. Something inside him hardened. As he stepped back toward his rented car, he took one last look at the house. No lights in the basement. No movement behind the curtains. Just stillness. Too much of it. And Julian knew, with cold certainty, that if he didn't intervene soon, Ava would never escape that house at all. Veronica Hartley had a talent, an unsettling, effortless talent, for making people believe whatever she needed them to. It wasn't just charm, it was calculation, the kind of calculation that let her smile while hiding an entire storm behind her eyes. The morning after Julian visited the house, she sat at the kitchen table with her iPhone angled perfectly beside a cup of untouched tea. The screen glowed with messages she'd been sending to neighbors. "Ava's struggling again. I'm doing my best, but she refuses help. Teen trauma is so misunderstood." Every message ended with a heart emoji. People adored her for it. Veronica wasn't taking chances anymore, not after seeing Julian at her door. She knew men like him. Wealthy, confident, the type who asked questions no one else dared to. She could feel control slipping inch by inch, so she doubled down. She printed old medical papers from Ava's file and added handwritten notes in the margins. Notes that made Ava look volatile, unstable, emotionally unpredictable. In reality, Ava had been a quiet, grieving girl, but Veronica had no intention of letting truth interfere. She rehearsed her lines in the mirror. She isolates herself. "She refuses meals I cook. She has outbursts. I'm trying truly." Her voice cracked at all the right places. Her tears were perfectly timed. But she didn't stop there. Veronica went to Ava's school counselor and expressed deep concern, painting herself as a mother drowning in responsibility but refusing to give up on her troubled stepdaughter. The counselor, sympathetic and unaware, assured her they would monitor the situation closely. Exactly what Veronica wanted. Meanwhile, downstairs in the basement, Ava sat on the thin mattress Veronica claimed she never used. Her stomach ached. Her head throbbed. She didn't know about the messages or the forged notes or the soft-spoken lies spreading through the neighborhood like perfume. But she felt something shifting. When Veronica descended the stairs with that perfect smile, Ava stiffened. "We need to talk," Veronica said sweetly, brushing imaginary dust from Ava's shoulder. "Someone's been asking about you." Ava's heart tightened. She knew asking for help could make things worse. It always did. Veronica leaned closer, her voice turning colder than the concrete floor. "Whatever story you think you'll tell," she whispered, "no one will believe you over me." And as the basement door clicked shut, Ava realized her stepmother wasn't just cruel. She was preparing for a war Ava didn't know how to fight. The next days unfolded with a heaviness Ava couldn't name. Veronica moved through the house like a woman preparing for a performance. Polished, controlled, deliberately gentle in the places where Ava wished she'd be cruel openly. That was always the trick with her. Nothing you could point to, everything you could feel. Late one afternoon, Ava overheard voices drifting from the living room. Veronica was speaking to someone on the phone, her tone smooth as glass. "Yes, I think it's time," she said. "She needs professional supervision, a structured environment. I can't risk her hurting herself or others." Ava froze in the hallway. Structured environment. She knew exactly what that meant. A residential youth facility. the place Veronica had threatened her with whenever Ava didn't react the right way. Once you were placed there, kids said, no one questioned the paperwork. Whatever story adults wrote about you became your truth. Ava's hands trembled as she stepped back, careful not to make a sound. She had never felt so close to disappearing. Veronica ended the call and immediately switched to humming softly, as if she hadn't just set fire to Ava's future. She moved into the kitchen, intentionally leaving the paperwork on the counter. Ava glanced at it from the hallway. The bold words "intake request pending" might as well have been a sentence. Later that night, Veronica brought Ava a plate with a single slice of bread. Thin, uneven, almost mocking. "You have to earn more than that," she said in that soft, poisonous tone. "If you weren't so difficult, we wouldn't be here." Ava didn't answer. She learned long ago that arguing only fed Veronica's cruelty. But inside, panic churned. If she was taken to that facility, nobody would ever learn the truth about what Veronica had done. Not the lies, not the hunger, not the forged notes, not the fear that lived with her in the basement. She would simply vanish into a system that trusted adults more than children. Upstairs, Veronica laughed over a phone call, talking about weekend plans as though nothing were happening. Ava pressed her hands together, trying to breathe, trying to think. Because tomorrow morning, Veronica planned to submit the final documents. And once she did, Ava had no idea if she'd ever see the outside world again. Julian Pierce wasn't a man who acted on impulse. He built companies, solved crises, and made decisions using logic sharper than the Mont Blanc pen he always carried in his briefcase. But ever since he'd seen Ava collapse at the market, something in him refused to stay quiet. He spent the night in his hotel room with his MacBook Air open, digging for anything that explained how a child could end up starving while living with a woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Public records weren't emotional. They didn't lie to protect reputations. And what Julian found made his pulse tighten. Bank statements from the Hartley household showed irregular withdrawals months after Ava's father died. Insurance payouts that never reached accounts, listed under Ava's name. Medical notes with handwriting so inconsistent it looked like someone had added to them long after the doctors signed off. But the worst part? Every report filed by Veronica painted Ava as a self-neglecting minor, a phrase used to justify restrictive intervention. Julian closed his laptop slowly. This wasn't just neglect, this was strategy. The next morning, he drove back to the market. The vendors recognized him instantly, not because he was a millionaire, but because he was the only outsider asking about Ava with genuine concern. One vendor, wiping his hands on his apron, leaned closer. "You didn't hear this from me," he whispered, "but that woman, she scares the girl. Ava never eats in front of her. She hides her food like she's afraid it'll be taken." Julian felt something inside him lock into place, a resolve, a direction. If Veronica planned to push Ava into a facility, Julian was running out of time. He contacted an attorney he trusted in Chicago, forwarding every document he'd found, every inconsistency highlighted in red. By afternoon, they had enough suspicion to request an emergency review if they could get Ava safely away first. Julian checked the clock. If Veronica kept a predictable schedule, she would submit Ava's commitment paperwork in less than 24 hours. He grabbed his keys. He didn't know how Veronica would react. He didn't know what Ava would tell him. He only knew one thing with absolute clarity. If he didn't reach that girl soon, she might disappear into a place truth would never touch. Julian returned to the market just as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the rows of food stalls. The place felt different now. Less like a busy corner of town and more like the only place still holding pieces of Ava's truth. Vendors who had watched her grow thinner each week, who had seen the fear in her eyes even when she tried to smile. He approached the fruit stand first. The elderly man sorting apples looked up, recognized him, and sighed heavily. "You're back about the girl," he said without hesitation. Julian nodded. "I need anything you can tell me. I'm trying to keep her safe." The man hesitated, glancing toward the street as if expecting someone to appear. Then he lowered his voice. "She never asked for much. Always polite. Said thank you, even when all I had left were bruised apples. But last month, she started shaking, like she was scared someone would see her take food from us." Julian felt his gut tighten. Someone meaning her stepmother? The man didn't answer directly, but the silence was enough. A few stalls down, the bakery owner chimed in. There were days she looked too weak to stand. I tried offering her fresh bread, but she refused. Said she couldn't bring anything home that smelled new. Can you imagine a child being afraid of fresh bread? Another vendor stepped closer, wiping sweat from his brow. One time, she hid a roll in her sleeve, not to eat later, just so Veronica wouldn't see her holding it. His voice cracked. That's not normal fear. That's survival. Julian recorded every statement with their permission, each word adding weight to the growing case against Veronica. Yet something still gnawed at him. Did Ava ever talk about leaving? He asked. A young woman from the produce stall shook her head sadly. She talked like she had nowhere to go, like the world outside her house didn't belong to her. Julian swallowed hard. That feeling, the belief that escape wasn't an option, was one he knew too well from his own childhood. As he thanked the vendors and turned to leave, the elderly man called after him. There's something else, he said. We never saw bruises, never saw marks. That woman's too smart for that. Whatever she's doing it in ways no one can see. Julian's chest tightened. If the damage was invisible, that meant Veronica had been breaking Ava in the quietest, most calculated ways, and time was running out to stop her. The night before Veronica planned to submit the intake papers, the house felt unusually still, like it was holding its breath. Ava sat on the edge of the thin basement mattress, knees pulled to her chest, listening to the faint creaks of footsteps above her. She knew those sounds by heart. The pacing meant Veronica was thinking, and when Veronica thought too long, something bad always followed. The basement door opened with a soft groan. Veronica descended the steps slowly, heels tapping against the old wood. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting. That would have been easier. Instead, she wore a gentle smile, one that made Ava's stomach twist. "Sweetheart," she said, brushing imaginary lint from her dress, "I need you to understand something important." Ava stayed quiet. Quiet was safest. Veronica crouched so their eyes were level. Tomorrow, people will ask questions about your behavior. They'll want to know why you don't eat, why you isolate, why you act out emotionally. Her tone softened even more, like honey hiding a sting. And I need you to tell them the truth, that you struggle, that you make things up when you get overwhelmed. Ava's throat tightened. But I don't... Veronica's smile didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. Ava, listen carefully. If you disagree with me in front of them, it will only prove you're unstable. They'll believe me. They always do. Ava felt the familiar cold settle into her chest. This wasn't a conversation. It was a script Veronica expected her to follow. And if you behave, Veronica continued, standing again, I promise your time at the facility will be brief. They'll help you learn to be calmer, to be normal. Isn't that what you want? Ava bit the inside of her cheek to keep from shaking. She had heard enough stories from kids at school. Facilities didn't help. They swallowed children whole. Veronica reached into her pocket and held up a small bracelet. Ava's old bracelet, the one her father gave her before he died. Ava's breath caught. I found this today, Veronica lied easily. If you cooperate tomorrow, you can have it back. Ava stared at it, heart cracking quietly. When Veronica turned to leave, she paused at the top of the stairs. Oh, and Ava, don't bother running, no one would believe you. The door clicked shut. And in the suffocating quiet that followed, Ava realized Veronica wasn't just preparing paperwork. She was erasing Ava's voice before the world ever heard it. Julian didn't sleep that night. Every hour that passed felt like another door closing on Ava's chances of escaping whatever Veronica had planned. At sunrise, he made his decision. He wasn't waiting for permission, approval, or perfect timing. He was getting Ava out. He drove to the Hartley house just as the neighborhood was waking up. A few porch lights flicked off. Sprinklers hissed across yellowing lawns. But the Hartley house stayed dim, shutters drawn tight like a clenched jaw. Julian knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door opened. Veronica stood there in a crisp blouse, makeup flawless, holding a stack of papers clipped neatly together. Intake documents, transfer forms, the future she'd already chosen for Ava. Mr. Pierce, she said coolly, I'm very busy today. Julian didn't blink. Where's Ava? She's resting. It's been a difficult week, Veronica offered a pitying smile. I understand you're concerned, truly, but stepping into a fragile family situation can make things worse. The performance was perfect, voice soft, eyes glossy with fabricated empathy. Anyone else might have believed her. Julian didn't. I'd like to speak with her, he said. Veronica straightened, blocking the doorway just a little more. That won't be possible. Not today. At that moment, faint footsteps creaked from inside the house. Julian's chest tightened. He knew that pattern, soft, hesitant, the way a child moves when she's afraid of being heard. Ava, he called gently. The footsteps froze. Veronica's expression cracked for half a second, just long enough for Julian to know he'd hit the truth. She stepped fully into the doorway. I'm calling the police, she snapped quietly. You're harassing us. But Julian had already anticipated that. Please do, he said. I'd like to speak to them myself. For the first time, Veronica blinked. Before she could respond, a small figure appeared at the end of the hallway. Ava, thin, pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else Julian hadn't seen in her before. Hope. Veronica spun around. Go back downstairs. No, Julian said sharply. She's coming with me. Ava clutched the railing, knuckles white. Veronica moved toward her, smile returning like a blade hidden in silk. Sweetheart, don't make a scene, Ava swallowed, voice shaking. Please, and don't leave me here. That was it, the moment everything shifted. Because once Ava spoke those 6 trembling words, Julian knew he would tear the entire world open before letting Veronica touch her again. Ava had never been on a plane before. She sat rigidly in the window seat as the aircraft lifted above Illinois, her small hands gripping the armrests while the world shrank beneath her. Julian watched her from the aisle seat, making sure she had a blanket, water, anything she needed, but she didn't reach for any of it. She kept her eyes fixed on the clouds like she didn't quite believe she was allowed to be here. When they landed in New York, the city lights glittered like another universe. Julian guided her through the airport, checking carefully that she stayed close, but not so close she felt crowded. She flinched every time someone spoke too loudly, every time an announcement echoed over the speakers. At the Ritz-Carlton, Ava froze in the lobby. The gold accents, the marble floors, the chandeliers glowing like captured stars. She whispered, Are we allowed here? Julian softened. You are. In the suite, he ordered room service, keeping the choices simple. When the tray arrived, covered dishes steaming gently, Ava stepped back as if it were a trap. It's for you, Julian said. Ava nodded but didn't move. He opened one lid. Warm chicken noodle soup. Another, fresh rolls. A small bowl of fruit. Nothing fancy, nothing overwhelming. Just food, real food, waiting for someone to eat it. Ava approached slowly, her fingers trembling as she touched the spoon. She took one small sip of soup, then stopped, eyes widening almost in panic. You can eat, Julian assured gently. No one's watching, no one's judging, and no one is going to take it from you. Her throat tightened. She tried another spoonful, then another, and suddenly, the dam inside her broke. She lifted the bowl with both hands, drinking the broth like she'd been wandering deserts her whole life. Tears blurred her vision, dripping silently onto the table. I'm sorry, she whispered between breaths. I'm not supposed to. I didn't mean to. You don't have to apologize for being hungry, Julian said. Ava lowered the bowl, chest trembling, eyes shining with something fragile and unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time since her father died, her body wasn't bracing for punishment. She wasn't being watched. She wasn't being judged. She wasn't being starved. She was simply fed. And as she looked around the quiet hotel room, she realized something terrifying and wonderful. This was the first place in years where she did not feel afraid. For the first time in days, Ava slept through the night. No creaking basement pipes, no footsteps above her head, no whispered threats slipping through the dark. Just silence. Safe, heavy silence. But safety has a short life when someone like Veronica Hartley is hunting it. By mid-morning, Julian's phone buzzed with an alert, then another, then 5 more. Social media notifications, news tags, mentions piling up like a digital storm. He opened the first link and felt his stomach drop. Veronica had posted a video. She sat on her living room couch, eyes puffy, voice trembling just enough to feel authentic. "My stepdaughter has been taken," she said, sniffing into a tissue. "She's emotionally vulnerable, and a wealthy stranger manipulated her. I'm terrified for her. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, people rushing to defend her. Poor mother. Where are the police? Who would steal a child?" Ava stood behind Julian, reading over his arm. With each sentence, she shrank a little more, her breath turning shallow. "She's lying," Ava whispered. "She's lying about all of it." Julian turned to her. "I know, and we're going to prove it." But Veronica wasn't done. She released photographs, old ones taken during moments Ava didn't know were being recorded. Ava crying, Ava sitting alone, Ava staring blankly. Out of context, each image painted her as unstable, withdrawn, troubled. Comments exploded. "That child needs help. Why would a businessman interfere? Something is off." It was exactly the story Veronica wanted the world to believe. Julian's attorney called minutes later. "She's filed a police report accusing you of unlawful custody. You'll need to be extremely careful. Do not go outside with the girl until we've prepared a response." Ava wrapped her arms around herself. "She's going to find me, isn't she?" No, Julian said firmly. "She won't, not here." But inside, he felt the pressure tightening. Veronica was brilliant at one thing, weaponizing public perception, and she had just turned the entire internet into a searchlight aimed directly at Ava. Julian closed the curtains of the hotel suite. He couldn't risk anyone catching a glimpse of her. Not yet. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled up, eyes glassy. "She said no one would believe me," she whispered. Julian knelt in front of her. "Ava, look at me. They will. I promise you, they will." But even as he said it, the reality pressed in. Veronica had seized control of the narrative, and the world was already listening. Julian's office in Manhattan was nothing like the world Ava came from. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the sharp geometry of Fifth Avenue below, cars moving like tiny pulses of light. The space was modern, quiet, purposeful, every detail precise, every line clean. To Ava, it felt like stepping onto another planet. She stood near the glass wall, clutching the Kindle Julian had given her to keep her mind busy. She didn't dare turn it on. She just held it, grounding herself in something that didn't hurt. Julian and his attorney, Daniel Klein, sifted through piles of documents on the long oak conference table. Legal pads, printed reports, screens lit with evidence. It looked like a battlefield. Papers instead of weapons, truth instead of armor. Daniel tapped a folder. Veronica's claims are polished, too polished. She anticipated pushback. Julian nodded. Because she's been building a false narrative for months. Ava shifted her weight, hugging the Kindle tighter. She felt invisible and exposed at the same time, like the room was too big and she was too small to belong in it. Daniel glanced at her gently. "Ava, anything you remember, anything at all, could help." She hesitated. "She said I had to play the part, if anyone asked. She said crying makes adults trust her more." Julian's jaw clenched. Daniel wrote quickly. "That fits with the pattern of emotional manipulation we're seeing, but we need something irrefutable, something irreversible, something Veronica couldn't twist." Ava walked slowly toward the table. There were papers. She kept them in a drawer in the hallway. She said they were backup stories in case I messed up. Julian exchanged a glance with Daniel, hope flickering for the first time. "If those documents exist," Daniel said, "they could prove premeditated fabrication." Ava's voice softened. "She never let me touch them." "But you saw them," Julian said. "That's enough for us to pursue access through emergency order." Daniel straightened. "We'll need to move fast. Veronica's social media weapon is gaining traction." Julian looked at Ava. She won't win, not this time. But Ava wasn't convinced. She stared down at the city lights far below, eyes reflecting neon and fear. "She always wins," she whispered. Julian walked to her side, keeping a respectful distance. "Not anymore." Before Ava could respond, Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, face tightening. "That was quick," he muttered. "Veronica just hired a high-profile attorney. She's preparing a public statement and a petition to demand Ava's immediate return." Ava's breath hitched. The war had officially begun, and Veronica was already moving her pieces. The storm over Manhattan thickened by late afternoon. Clouds heavy, air electric, as if the city sensed something was about to break. Inside Julian's office, tension pressed just as hard. Daniel paced near the conference table, phone in hand, while Julian sifted through online reactions to Veronica's new public statement. Ava sat quietly in the corner, knees drawn up, watching them both with wary eyes. Every headline felt like another wall closing in. Then Julian's phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. A Chicago area code. He answered cautiously. "Julian Pierce." A shaky male voice responded. "You don't know me, but I knew Ava's father." Julian straightened immediately. "Who is this?" "Mark Hanley. I was his neighbor and his friend. I moved to Wisconsin after he died, but I saw the story online. I didn't believe any of it, not for a second." Julian glanced toward Ava, her head lifted, hope flickering like a timid candle. Mark continued. "Before Ava's dad passed, he left something with me, said it was important, said if anything ever happened to him, someone would need to know the truth." Julian's pulse sharpened. "What truth?" The man exhaled shakily. "He told me Veronica was draining his accounts, that she was controlling access to Ava, that he was planning to change the insurance beneficiary back to his daughter. But he didn't trust Veronica enough to tell her." Ava's breath caught. Mark added, voice tight, "I recorded our conversation that night. He asked me to. He said, if anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." Silence hit the room like a blow. Julian felt the air shift. Daniel had stopped pacing, eyes wide. Ava covered her mouth, shoulders trembling. "Can you send the recording?" Julian asked. "Already did," Mark replied. "Check your email, and Julian, protect that girl. Her father loved her more than anything." The call ended. Julian opened the email. There it was, a single audio file. Daniel clicked play. A man's weary voice filled the room. Ava's father. "She's trying to cut Ava out," he said. "If something happens to me, it's because Veronica made sure I couldn't stop her. Please, don't let my daughter end up alone." Ava collapsed into silent tears, shaking uncontrollably. Julian knelt beside her, steady but gentle. "Ava," he said softly, "this changes everything." Daniel nodded, already dialing contacts. "This is no longer a custody dispute. This is potential criminal evidence." Ava wiped her face, voice barely a whisper. She knew he was trying to protect me, and now the world would know it too. The Midtown Charity Gala was already buzzing when Julian stepped into the marble foyer with Daniel and a disguised security escort trailing behind them. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and conversations floated beneath chandeliers that dripped light like molten gold. This event, packed with donors, CEOs, media, and high-influence eyes, was the worst place for conflict, which meant it was the perfect place for Veronica. Daniel had warned Julian not to attend. "She wants a stage," he said. "Don't give her one." But Julian knew better. If Veronica planned to twist the narrative publicly, he needed to be there to intercept the blow before it landed on Ava. He didn't expect Veronica to arrive so quickly. She swept into the ballroom like she owned it. Hair flawless, diamond necklace catching every beam of light, posture poised with weaponized elegance. Her attorney walked beside her, a tall man in a charcoal suit who radiated confidence built on courtroom victories. The moment Veronica spotted Julian across the room, her expression softened into practiced grief. "Oh, Julian," she exclaimed loudly, drawing curious gazes. "Where is my stepdaughter? Where have you taken her?" Guests turned. Photographers lifted their cameras. The room stilled just enough for tension to bloom. Julian kept his voice calm. "Ava is safe." Veronica laughed, a fragile, aching sound crafted for sympathy. "Safe? With you?" She dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "This man," she announced to the room, "has abducted an emotionally unstable child. I am begging the authorities to return her before he does irreversible damage." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel leaned toward Julian. "Don't react. She wants you to lose control." But Veronica didn't stop. She stepped onto the small stage near the orchestra, lifting the microphone as though she'd been invited to speak. "I raised Ava after her father died," she said, shaking her head dramatically. "I sacrificed everything for her, and now a millionaire, someone who barely knows her, has decided he knows better than her own family." People watched, transfixed. Julian felt anger burning low in his chest, but he held steady. Then Veronica delivered the line she'd been saving. "If Ava doesn't come home tonight, I fear she'll never recover from the trauma he's causing." The crowd gasped. Daniel's phone vibrated. He checked it, eyes widening. "Julian," he whispered urgently, "the packet of evidence, Mark's recording, the vendor statements, they're ready. We can counter her right here, right now, if you choose." Julian looked up at Veronica, who stood glowing under the lights, certain she'd already won. And he realized this was the perfect stage, not for her performance, but for her downfall. While Veronica performed her tragic monologue for the Manhattan elite, Ava waited in a quiet service hallway behind the ballroom, guarded by hotel staff Julian trusted. The distant hum of violins leaked through the walls, mixing with the pounding in her chest. She'd never been in a place like this, so bright, so loud, so full of people who believed every elegant lie her stepmother told. Julian stepped out of the ballroom to check on her. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Ava shook her head. "She'll twist anything I say. She always does." "You're not alone this time," Julian reminded her. Before he could say more, a commotion erupted inside the ballroom. Veronica had spotted Ava's silhouette behind the frosted window of the hallway door. "There!" Veronica cried dramatically, voice trembling with theatrical desperation. "She's here! My poor daughter! Julian, let her come to me!" The crowd turned, hungry for spectacle. Phones lifted, cameras rolled, reporters pushed forward. Security hesitated. They weren't sure who had authority. Veronica knew that, and she used it. She strode toward Ava, arms wide, voice dripping with maternal anguish. "Sweetheart, come here. Mommy's here now." Ava froze. Every instinct screamed danger. She stepped backward until her shoulders hit the wall. Julian moved between them. "You're not touching her." Veronica's face melted into wounded innocence. "Why are you doing this? Look at her, terrified because you've confused her. Let her speak." And then, before anyone could stop it, Veronica grabbed Ava's wrist and pulled her into the ballroom. The room erupted, flashes, gasps, whispers turning into a suffocating roar. Ava stood trembling under the chandelier's glare, feeling hundreds of eyes slicing into her. Veronica tightened her grip, whispering through clenched teeth, "Say what I told you, right now." Ava's vision blurred, the room tilted. She heard her father's voice from Mark's recording echoing in her mind. "Don't let my daughter end up alone." Julian pushed through the crowd, but Veronica held Ava like a trophy. "Go on, sweetheart," Veronica urged loudly, giving her wrist a hidden squeeze. "Tell everyone how confused you've been, how you just needed structure." Ava's breath shook. Her pulse hammered. Her voice felt locked behind a wall of fear Veronica had built over years. But then she looked at Julian, steady, calm, unblinking. Someone who believed her without needing proof. Something cracked. Ava pulled her wrist free. "No," she said quietly. The room went silent. "No," Veronica repeated, smile twitching. Ava swallowed, voice trembling but unmistakably clear. "I'm not confused. I'm scared of you." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. And for the first time, Veronica's perfect mask slipped. For a moment, the entire ballroom froze. Violins paused mid-note, cameras halted mid-flash, even the air itself seemed to stiffen around Ava's trembling voice. Veronica's smile faltered, then twitched back into place like a mask being forcibly retaped. "Honey," she said softly, too softly, "you don't know what you're saying. You're overwhelmed." Ava stepped back from her. "No, I'm not overwhelmed. I'm telling the truth." That sentence, simple, fragile, landed like a hammer. A journalist near the stage whispered, "Is this real?" Another leaned forward, recording every second. People who moments ago adored Veronica now watched her hands, her posture, her eyes, the way predators study prey when it stumbles. Veronica tried again, voice cracking in the perfect places. "Sweetheart, please, you're scaring me." Ava shook her head. "You scare me every day." Gasps rippled through the crowd, phones lifted higher. Julian finally reached the stage area, placing himself between Ava and the nearest camera without blocking the view entirely. "Take your time," he murmured to her. "Say only what you want to say, nothing else." But Ava wasn't looking at Julian anymore. She was staring directly at Veronica. "You said no one would believe me," Ava said, her voice wobbling but growing stronger. "You said people liked you too much to care what you did to me." Veronica's eyes hardened, the softness evaporating. "Stop this," she hissed under her breath. "Right now." But Ava didn't stop. "You didn't let me eat unless I earned it. You made me sleep in the basement. You told people I was unstable so they'd never listen to me." Ava's lips trembled. "I thought it was my fault. I thought maybe I really was broken." Whispers swirled through the ballroom like wildfire. Veronica's attorney lunged forward. "This is emotional manipulation," he barked. "The girl has been coached." Julian stepped in sharply. "Nobody coached her. This is her voice finally being heard." Ava inhaled deeply, tears streaking her cheeks. She looked at the guests, men in tuxedos, women in glittering gowns, all watching a child dismantle a monster with nothing but truth. Then she delivered the sentence that would echo through every news outlet within the hour. "I wasn't starving because I forgot to eat. I was starving because she wanted me weak enough to control." The ballroom erupted, shouts, flashes, stunned disbelief. Veronica staggered back, face drained of color, mask shattered beyond repair. And in that single, unpolished, trembling moment, Ava took back the power Veronica spent years stealing. The ballroom was a battlefield of whispers and camera flashes when Daniel finally stepped forward, a folder tucked beneath his arm like a loaded weapon. Julian gave him a small nod, the signal they had rehearsed, the moment everything turned. Veronica sensed it instantly. Her posture stiffened, her breathing sharpened. She knew something was coming, something she hadn't prepared for. Daniel reached the mic. "If the room will allow," he said calmly, "we'd like to present verified evidence related to Ava Hartley's welfare." The crowd leaned in. Veronica lunged toward him. "You can't do that! This is a private matter." "Actually," Daniel replied, "you made it public when you accused Mr. Pierce of abduction." The first slide illuminated the screen, statements from market vendors. Their words appeared in clean black text. She hid food in her sleeves so her stepmother wouldn't see. She shook with fear when we offered her fresh bread. She thanked us like she wasn't used to kindness. Gasps spread through the audience. Veronica's attorney stepped forward. "These are anecdotes, unverified." Daniel didn't miss a beat. "Then let's move to verified." He opened the next file. A still image appeared, an email timestamped 2 weeks before Ava collapsed at the market. Veronica had written to a private consultant, inquiring how to file psychological concerns to protect herself legally if the child grows unpredictable. A thread of murmurs rolled through the ballroom. Then Daniel tapped the final file. "This," he said, "comes from a close friend of Ava's late father." Ava squeezed Julian's arm, bracing herself. The audio played. Her father's voice echoed across the golden room, tired, afraid, painfully honest. "Veronica is trying to cut Ava out. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. She can't know I'm changing the insurance beneficiary back to my daughter. Please, don't let her end up alone." The audience fell into stunned silence. Even the photographers lowered their cameras, some visibly shaken. Veronica's complexion went gray. Her knees wobbled. Her attorney tried to interrupt, but the damage was already done. The crowd had turned on her completely. Someone whispered, "She's been lying for years." Another, "She used that child for money." Ava stood very still. The room's entire weight seemed to tilt toward her, this time not with skepticism but with recognition. Validation. Julian touched her shoulder gently. "Ava, they believe you now." Veronica stumbled backward, voice cracking. "This is twisted. He lied. He had to be mistaken." But no one believed her anymore. And in that glittering ballroom, with her father's voice still hanging in the air, Ava watched the world finally see the monster she'd been trapped with all along. The ballroom, moments ago dazzled with elegance, now vibrated with outrage. Veronica Hartley stood in the center like someone who had just been shoved under a spotlight she could no longer control. Her hands shook, her breathing hitched. The polished veneer she'd worn for years cracked open in front of Manhattan's elite. "This is all fabricated," she shouted, voice wobbling. "Ava's father was confused. He misunderstood things." But the crowd no longer looked at her with sympathy. They looked at her the way you look at someone whose mask just splintered into dust. Daniel closed the laptop gently, his point made. "The authorities have already been notified," he announced. "The recording, along with financial records and witness statements, will be submitted formally tonight." Veronica's attorney swallowed hard. "Veronica, we should step outside." She jerked away from him. "No, I'm not leaving. I raised her. She's mine." Julian moved subtly in front of Ava. not touching her but shielding her from Veronica's unraveling desperation. "You don't own her," Julian said quietly, "and you never will again." For a heartbeat, Veronica froze. Then the panic hit. She reached toward Ava, but two uniformed officers entered through the side doors, firm but calm, intercepting her path. Gasps rippled through the ballroom again. "Mrs. Hartley," one officer said, "we'd like to speak with you regarding allegations of financial misconduct and the welfare of your stepdaughter." Veronica's face collapsed into disbelief. "Financial? Ava is lying. This man is manipulating you all." But when the officer gestured for her to step aside, her attorney finally broke. "Veronica, it's over. Don't make this worse." Veronica's expression twisted, not into fear, but into fury. A trapped, cornered fury she could no longer hide. She pointed at Ava. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "Do you hear me? Everything." But her voice cut off as the officers guided her away from the crowd. A hush settled over the ballroom. Cameras followed her exit. Guests whispered in stunned disbelief. Ava didn't move. She stood perfectly still, watching the woman who had controlled every part of her life being led out the door. No yelling, no fighting, just a quiet, undeniable collapse. Julian knelt beside her. "You're safe," he said gently. Ava's lips parted, but no sound came. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She just stared as though trying to process a world where Veronica Hartley no longer stood between her and sunlight. In the distance, the doors closed behind Veronica, and for the first time, Ava felt the weight of her stepmother's shadow lift, slowly, unmistakably, like a night sky finally giving way to dawn. The days following the gala felt unreal, quiet in a way Ava had never experienced. No footsteps approaching her door, no rehearsed accusations, no rules designed to break her spirit. Instead, she woke up in a sunlit bedroom inside Julian's Manhattan apartment, wrapped in a soft blanket that didn't scratch her skin, surrounded by silence that didn't feel dangerous. Julian stood in the kitchen that morning, brewing coffee while glancing at the legal documents spread across the counter. Daniel had worked through the night, filing emergency motions, submitting evidence, securing protective orders. By breakfast, the judge granted temporary guardianship to Julian, pending a full investigation. Ava was safe. Legally, physically, finally. She padded into the room wearing socks 3 sizes too big. Julian hadn't figured out clothing shopping yet. "Is it okay that I'm up?" she asked quietly. Julian smiled. "Ava, you don't need permission to wake up." That simple sentence hit her harder than he expected. She sat at the table slowly, like someone afraid the chair might vanish beneath her. He slid a plate toward her. Pancakes. Real ones. Warm, fluffy, the kind her father used to make. Ava stared at them for a long second before whispering, "I forgot what they smelled like." Julian didn't push her. He let her take her time. Later, he took her to a local bookstore. The moment she stepped inside, surrounded by shelves of stories and quiet corners, something opened in her chest. The clerk handed her a small journal after Julian explained she liked writing. Ava held it like something sacred. "You can write whatever you want in there," Julian said. She pressed the cover to her heart. "I've never had a notebook that belonged only to me." They spent the afternoon at appointments, meeting a social worker, a counselor, a pediatrician. Every adult spoke to her gently, listened patiently, treated her like someone whose experience mattered. It confused her. It humbled her. It healed her. That night, back at the apartment, Ava stood on the balcony overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The city glowed, loud, alive, endless. She breathed in the cold air, feeling a strange lightness in her ribs. Julian stepped beside her. "How does it feel?" Ava didn't look away from the lights. Her voice was quiet but sure. "I don't feel invisible anymore." Julian rested a hand lightly on the railing near hers, not touching, just close enough to mean something. "You never were," he said. Ava exhaled, warm breath drifting into the night. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a door opening. A week after the gala, Manhattan felt different to Ava. Not because the city had changed, but because she finally had space inside herself to see it. The skyline no longer looked sharp and intimidating. It looked wide, open, possible. Every morning, sunlight filtered through the apartment windows and warmed her face, before she even opened her eyes. She still startled sometimes, waking in panic until she remembered there was no basement here, no locked fridge, no voice telling her she was too much or not enough. Just quiet, just freedom. Julian kept his promise. He didn't rush her healing, didn't flood her days with noise or expectations. Instead, he introduced structure gently. School enrollment paperwork, therapy sessions, breakfast routines, evenings spent reading together in the living room while the city hummed outside. He treated these things not as obligations, but as invitations. One crisp Saturday afternoon, he brought her to the Brooklyn Bridge. Ava walked slowly, taking in the sweep of the river, the endless stretch of sky, the buzz of tourists, snapping photos. She held her journal, the one she'd filled with sketches, poems, and scattered thoughts she'd never dared write before. "What made you choose this place?" she asked. Julian smiled. "It's a good spot for new beginnings. I came here the day I left foster care. It felt like the whole world opened from this bridge." Ava looked out across the water. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she opened her journal to a fresh page and began writing, her handwriting steadier than it had been in years. When she finished, she read it aloud softly. "I'm not afraid of tomorrow anymore, because tomorrow finally belongs to me." Julian didn't respond right away. He let the words settle into the wind, into the river below, into the space between them. Words that felt like a promise Ava was making to herself. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. Ava nodded, tears gathering, but not from sadness, from release. In the weeks that followed, the investigation moved swiftly. Veronica faced charges for fraud and child endangerment. The world she'd built on lies crumbled piece by piece, until nothing remained but consequences she could no longer outrun. Ava didn't celebrate her stepmother's downfall. She simply accepted it. Justice wasn't revenge, it was balance restored. And as spring approached, she stepped fully into a life she never thought she'd get to live, safe, seen, and finally free. Because this time, the story of Ava Hartley was written by her own hand. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But hey, my wonderful friend watching this, you're still here, aren't you? If you made it all the way to this moment, something in Ava's journey must have touched your heart in a way that felt real, maybe even familiar. So let's take a breath together and look at what this story is really reminding us. Ava's path shows us that healing isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and deeply personal. It's choosing yourself even when you feel small. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When we choose truth over fear, dignity over silence, we start coloring our lives with strength instead of survival. Stoics believed hardship reveals who we are, not who we must remain. And Ava's courage proves that even the softest voice can break the loudest lie. So maybe this touched you, because somewhere inside, you know you deserve safety, respect, and a future that belongs to you, just like Ava did. If this story moved you even a little, hit like, share it with someone who might need this reminder, and subscribe so we can keep healing, learning, and growing together. You being here matters, more than you know.